Hi all, our team will be presenting our work on strategic aims in the South China Sea and developing a renewed PRC strategy in changing times. Our thesis focuses on understanding the efficacy of the current approach of the PRC in the South China Sea and adapting the strategy in light of a changing geopolitical context, especially given Western scrutiny. We focus on finding ways to develop a new strategy to ensure continued Chinese dominance in the region. We will begin with a historical overview of the context in the South China Sea, focusing on claims by both China and the other nations in the region. From there, we will analyze current strategic objectives for the PRC and determine how best to fulfill these in changing times and under increasing Western scrutiny. Our approach will be two-pronged. On the one hand, we will seek to counter the US and Southeast Asian nations by emphasizing the strengths of the approach to date. We will seek to understand what it is that has made the current approach so effective. On the other hand, we will turn to new areas of promise and outline potential strategic options to further pursue dominance in the South China Sea. Next slide.
The background of our research will focus on the post-World War II timeline in the South China Sea, with the exception of a brief overview of the 9-dash line's historical origins for the People's Republic of China. We will make sure we explain all claims made by all parties to include the PRC, Taiwan, Japan, the Philippines, Vietnam, Brunei, and Malaysia. We will also outline specific current legal claims and outline the US approach in the Western Pacific since World War II. Next slide. The PRC strategic objectives are twofold. First is about resources. The South China Sea has 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas and 11 billion barrels of oil in proved and provable resources, and the Chinese need these resources for continued economic growth. Secondly, for the preparation of military groundwork for a successful unification of Taiwan. Ultimately, building up these atolls and other islands makes unsinkable island aircraft carriers that allow the PRC to put American naval forces under threat from up to 1,000 nautical miles from these islands. Next slide. So why is the Chinese strategy so effective? This constitutes the heart of our research that is currently in progress. We have our framework, which we will use the DIME model to break down this Chinese strategic effectiveness and ultimately determine what were the key factors in allowing for Chinese dominance both militarily and economically. Next slide.
Diplomatically and legally, the Philippines has been the most active in responding to Chinese incursions into the South China Sea. In 2013, the Philippines brought an arbitration case to the UN against China, claiming that China had violated the UN Convention on the Laws of the Sea. The UN found that Chinese claims in the South China Sea had no legal basis. But only in 2020 did the US formally announce that its policy on the topic was in line with the UN Convention on the Laws of the Sea's finding. Prior to that, it retained a neutral position. Will this change in policy persuade China to retreat? Militarily, the United States has been the most active in responding to the Chinese, but have US Navy freedom of navigation operations been effective? Have they forced China to change its behavior? Most notably, in 2020, the United States failed to take action when Chinese ships swarmed Scarborough Shoal, leaving a treaty ally, the Philippines, high and dry in the process. We will also explore economic and political responses to understand if they have been effective in countering Chinese strategy in the region. Next slide.
So lastly, for future prospects, history alone cannot only offer a solution to the conflict, rather it just offers insight into the uncompromising nature of the claims raised by involved states. Additionally, history would help us to understand why the current Chinese government refuses to compromise on its self-proclaimed rights in the Southern Sea. Therefore, it's very highly unlikely that the current South China Sea situation will de-escalate. Instead, the situation will likely exacerbate due to increases in intermittent escalating tensions, intensified competitions, and widening differences. Military and strategic competitions are increasing in the area. Unilateral moves by disputing countries like Malaysia, Vietnam, and Philippines are also increasing tension. And then further, just policies over code of conducts and just the writing that goes into it will ultimately shift and change just how countries view it.
So our research has already uncovered, as we see changes in both the Biden administration and the ASEAN approaches to the PRC, our research has already uncovered possible strategic options for the Chinese. And these are written at least, these are written below as some of the options that the Chinese could pursue. As we focus on our research, we will take a look at each of these individually and determine whether the efficacy of these approaches make for the better achievement of PRC strategic objectives. Finally, these options maintain a political and economic and military foothold in the contested areas, but they don't appear overly aggressive, which would trigger the United States into greater conflict.